There. Anybody need a snack? Kratos? Snack?
I do not need a snack.
What we need...
Ah yes, the time has finally come for another episode of Things I Fucking Hate. This is when I look at a game and discuss the 5 things about it that I don't like. In this case, the critically acclaimed God of War Ragnarok. It's okay. So, before anybody says anything, Ragnarok is, in my opinion, better than the previous game. In fact, since I've gotten over the unjustifiable logic of that game being connected, even though it makes no sense, I've been able to look at this game and see it for what it is, and it's definitely not bad. Some improvements have been made, and we'll talk about those in the Things I Like video, but some downgrades have been made too. And since I'll be devoting an entire video to the game's narrative, as I did with the last game, I won't be spending too much time talking about the story. It can't be avoided completely, as it is the main focus, but I'll mainly stick to other topics. So, let's see how this highly anticipated masterpiece shit the bed. This is 5 Things I Fucking Hate About God of War Ragnarok.
Well, I recognize that dour expression anywhere. Care to tell me what went wrong?
It's too long. So, oddly enough, we're gonna kick things off with a bit of controversy. In my opinion, a game like this taking 20 to 24 hours to complete, give or take a few side missions, is really unnecessary. Especially because the first game was about half that. I say it's controversial as other games have done this successfully, but it kind of has to be justified. And I don't think this is. Even if you have the most engaging narrative and mechanically flawless gameplay, something we'll talk about in a future video, it still tends to get a bit dull after the 20th hour. Some games can get away with this, like Red Dead Redemption 2 due to the open world element, and dare I say, even The Last of Us Part 2 has more justification than this. Don't get me wrong, I despise that game with a fucking passion, but due to its separating its story between 2 perspectives, it's slightly less noticeable. But just slightly. And even though you do play as Kratos and Atreus this time, which do play a bit differently, it's still the same ongoing narrative that never seems to end. And the gameplay does eventually start to get repetitive and boring. I know improvements have been made, and yes, this game is superior, but at some point, enough is enough. Not helping the matter is the next thing I hate kind of ties into this. That being...
I suppose what's done is done. But you'll be putting your foot down from now on if you know what's good.
Walking simulator. Remember how I said in the first game that once you get past the intro, you get to spend most of your time playing the game? Well, you don't get a runtime this long that way.
Shocking.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about that game, being gameplay focused, has been replaced with a much more balanced experience. If by balanced you mean watching cutscenes and listening to dialogue, cause if not, I have to question the replay value. Like I said, we'll talk about the narrative in a future video, but let's just say if you don't like it, you may have an issue replaying this. Obviously, I don't like the story in the first game for a number of reasons, not to mention making no sense in the grand scheme of the franchise. But at least you get to spend most of your time playing the fucking game. With Ragnarok, you'll primarily go to an area, spend most of the time in the area doing stuff, leave the area and head back to Sindri's place, watch a cutscene that's usually longer than it needs to be, head to the next area, spend a lot of time listening to dialogue, possibly with limited movement, and repeat. If you're someone who loves the game's story so much that you can enjoy this time and time again, then this is fine. If not, then there's Evil West. That I wish I was playing right now. I'll admit, it didn't bother me as much as some other titles, but upon a second playthrough, it is a bit problematic. Then you add on the fact that the game is 12 hours too long, and we find ourselves in the same ever-so-common predicament that plagues modern gaming. It's something I fucking hate, and we're not even halfway done.
I
Oh, Cindy, you sodding bastard!
The fucking axe. Ah yes, the Leviathan axe. How I've always hated thee. Making us wait half the game to get the Blades of Chaos was bad enough, but giving us this thing in return was probably the game's biggest insult. Well, aside from calling it God of War and the whole ashes off the cliff thing, third biggest insult. But Ragnarok, on the other hand, has the exact opposite problem, as I never really felt the need to use it. You might see it used here for the sake of collecting footage, but when you get the Blades of Chaos from the beginning, and the badass staff you eventually get, the axe just feels obsolete. Some enemies may be weak to it, and you do need it for certain puzzles, but if it was somehow lost halfway through the game, I wouldn't be complaining. In fact, I kind of expected it. It being the things I like list if that was the case, but that's how useless the axe feels. I just don't get why it's in the game. But even though I don't like it, and I'd gladly go on without it, I have to look at this from an objective standpoint. Yeah, I think it's stupid, but a lot of people don't, and it is the iconic weapon of the new series. So when it gets overshadowed by the previous iconic weapon, and by another weapon you don't get until after the halfway point, it is a bit problematic. I personally don't care, but hypothetically it is something I'd fucking hate. And you gotta admit, it's kind of ironic.
Because I cannot wait to watch you explain this mess to the Almighty. Oh, it's going to be
Cliche. So, like I said, we're gonna save the narrative talk for a future video, but there is one thing I really thought stood out. A lot of cliche nonsense, which wouldn't be as problematic if the game wasn't around 24 hours long. Then when you add on the fact that this game is very cutscene and dialogue heavy, it becomes a bit of an issue. You know, if you don't like cliche nonsense. Now, I'm not saying the story is bad, but there are a few things about it that shouldn't have been a thing. First off, Atreus and Kratos spend a lot of time bickering about safety and whatnot. It's something that happened in the previous game, and that should have been the end of it. There could have been some kind of contention, but instead they argue about shit for almost the whole game. Why? So they can embrace each other at the end, because that's something you don't see in games these days.
Terribly ingenious, highly imaginative, incredibly inventive.
Then there's Freya. You know, the one who's pissed off because you killed her son and now she wants to kill you. Well, fear not. This gets resolved the second time she encounters Kratos as he stops Atreus from killing her. Which is pretty much what you'd expect him to do. I mean, he killed her son for the exact same reason, knowing it would have consequences, so this really doesn't change anything, but
maybe. For the moment. You're of more use to me. Alive.
But that's not the end just yet, because she still says she might kill Kratos.
You are not the one who needs to die.
So she's not gonna kill Kratos. I didn't see that coming. I thought that was the end. You really had me fooled. And then there's the real big fuck up. You know how Tyr ends up being Odin the whole time and inevitably kills Brock, one of the franchise's most beloved characters? That was a powerful moment, one that you did not see coming, probably the best in the game. Unfortunately, nobody really matures in this game, so it's followed by, you guessed it, more stupid shit. Like Atreus giving up, only to go back a few minutes later because we've never seen that concept before, and Sindri, blaming Atreus for Brock's death. Even though he had absolutely no issue with trying to find Tyr or any of the stuff they've done prior. We'll talk more about why I really hate this in a future video, but for now, I blame it on a lack of ideas. Something I think everybody fucking hates.
You weren't sorry. This is what sorry looks like.
So, for the final thing I fucking hate, let's see if we can figure it out ourselves, as it is kind of a combination of the first two things. What do you get when you have a game that's way too fucking long, even without the cutscenes, and puts way too much emphasis on the story? Well, you get gameplay that's neglected. Now, I'm not saying the gameplay isn't innovative, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's repetitive.
Positively shocking.
Again, it's back to The Last of Us Part 2. The gameplay was highly improved from the first game, but after the 20th hour of one of the worst narratives in gaming history, I kind of stopped giving a shit. The difference here is that the first game had real good gameplay that wasn't quite as repetitive, as that game was about half the length, meaning the new game really had to do something different to improve on this. And it does, we'll get to that in a future video, but it's not really enough. Once you get through about half the game, not much is gonna happen to shake things up, aside from the inclusion of the staff. You do get to play as Atreus, which does feel different, but having different characters assist you this time doesn't change that much. There is a bigger enemy variety this time, and a lot of new areas to explore, but you rarely feel like you're doing anything that different. And I'm sorry, but with the old games, that wasn't the case. Granted, that's the expected outcome when your game doesn't take a decade to complete. I'm not saying I could have done better, but I would have made the game about 10 hours shorter at least. And then again, I probably wouldn't have made the franchise into Parenthood the game. You can have the most fun gameplay in history, but it's gonna get dull eventually. And in this case, the narrative really is the only thing keeping it going, so you better hope you like it. If you don't, well, you might just fucking hate it. And there it is, 5 things I fucking hate about God of War Ragnarok. Doesn't mean I hate the game, and I'll soon have a video to show you why that is. If you're too mad to care, then let me know in the comments, and I'll get back to you. I'm the Game Analyst, and don't forget, if you kill somebody's son, they probably won't forget that. Unless you do something similar. Then they probably will. What? You're actually here? That's fucking amazing. I guess you may as well check out the main channel, in which I discuss movies, TV series, and the offensive topics that lie within. If that interests you, then press the link in the description. It's right there.